All right, so are you ready to go bananas with this deep dive? We're tackling The Monkey, that new horror comedy based on, of course, the Stephen King story.
Oh, I am ready.
We've got a stack of reviews here, and let me tell you, people are either totally loving the chaos of this film or they're finding it a bit much.
Yeah, it seems like it's pretty divisive.
So what is it about The Monkey that's got everyone going ape?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? It takes this classic idea, the curse object, and it just like cranks it up to a whole other level,
Yeah,
blends horror and humor in a way that I think is both exhilarating and kind of unsettling too.
right.
It's not just about those jump scares, it's about making you laugh while you're sitting there questioning if you're losing your mind.
Exactly. And the reviews are really highlighting this crazy mix of over-the-top deaths.
Hmm.
We're talking cartoonish, ridiculous deaths with these darkly comedic undertones. Like, one minute you've got people getting electrocuted in a swimming pool, and the next, someone's getting decapitated. It's a bloodbath, but somehow it's played for laughs.
Yeah, there's one critic even called the kills gleefully violent, and I think that's really spot on.
Wow, that's a pretty intense way to describe it.
It is, but it just kind of captures the film's tone so perfectly. It's this weird embrace of the absurdity of it all. Like it's daring you to look away while you're chuckling at just how ridiculous the whole thing is.
Yeah, I'm also seeing tons of praise for the pacing. It clocks in at a tight 98 minutes. Reviewers are calling it a runaway train, just constantly moving, keeping you on the edge of your seat.
Oh, absolutely. The pacing is definitely one of its strengths for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of mirrors the chaotic energy of the monkey itself, this unpredictable force of destruction, just constantly wreaking havoc. It leaves you feeling breathless, like you've just been caught up in this whirlwind of madness.
It's interesting you say that because speaking of whirlwind performances, we have to talk about Theo James in this film.
Yes.
He plays twin brothers, Hal and Bill, and people are raving about his performance. Is he really that good?
He's being hailed as a revelation. And it's not just about playing two roles. It's about embodying these two completely distinct personalities. Like, Hal is portrayed as this vulnerable, repressed character, while Bill is just like his polar opposite. Brash, toxic, seemingly without a conscience.
Wow. One review even called James's performance a masterclass in duality.
Wow.
I'm really intrigued by how he handles those scenes where Hal is trying to connect with his son amidst all the killer toy chaos.
Oh yeah, that's where the film's emotional core really comes into play, I think. We see Hal grappling with the absurdity of the whole situation, trying to protect his son from this murderous monkey while also dealing with his own inner turmoil. It adds a layer of depth to what could have easily been a purely superficial, horror comedy.
Now, this is where it gets interesting for me because the director, Osgood Perkins, we know him for his dark, atmospheric horror films. But some critics are suggesting that this one feels more personal, almost like he's channeling something deeper with this film.
Yeah, and Perkins has spoken very openly about the impact of losing his mother in the 9/11 attacks.
Wow.
And it seems like he's woven some of that personal experience into The Monkey. The film grapples with themes of inherited trauma, that randomness of life, and the struggle to find meaning in the face of senseless tragedy.
So then the monkey itself, it becomes more than just a creepy toy.
Right.
It represents this larger, inescapable force of grief, of chaos, that can just disrupt our lives in an instant.
Exactly. It's like this metaphorical layer that adds a weightiness to the film that goes beyond just the shock value of the gore and the dark humor. It forces you to actually confront those uncomfortable questions about mortality, about loss, and the fragility of our existence, really.
Visually, how does the film handle this blend of humor and darkness?
Oh, the visual style's fascinating. It's been described as this mix of grindhouse grit and art house elegance, like a really strange juxtaposition.
Interesting.
There's one specific shot that a lot of reviewers mentioned, a blood-soaked monkey gritting in the shadows,
Oh, wow.
which sounds both visually striking and deeply unsettling. It's like the film's constantly playing with your expectations, lulling you into this sense of security with its visual beauty before hitting you with this dose of shocking violence.
So we've got this intense blend of horror and humor, a powerful central metaphor, and a visually stunning aesthetic. But I'm curious, are there any aspects of the film that fall short?
Well, while Monkey excels at delivering shock and awe, some critics did feel it kind of stumbled when it came to fully fleshing out its emotional core, particularly when it comes to the relationship between Hal and his son Petey.
Oh, that's interesting. I was wondering if those familial relationships would hold up under all the chaos.
Yeah, reviewers felt that while James portrays Hal's angst and struggle really well, the bond between father and son felt rushed, and it lacked the depth needed to truly resonate.
So while the monkey may be a visual and visceral spectacle, it seems like some critics felt it didn't quite deliver on the emotional front.
That seems to be the emerging consensus. But before we jump to conclusions, there's another layer to this film that we need to discuss, a layer that delves into the complexities of the characters and their relationships. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
So we left off talking about some of the criticisms of the monkey, like not fully exploring the emotional depth of the story, specifically the relationship between Hal and his son, Petey. Is that really a deal breaker for a horror comedy, though?
That's a really good question. I mean, on the one hand, you could say that, yeah, the over-the-top nature of the film doesn't really lend itself to, like, nuanced character development. But then again, if you're going to introduce these emotional elements, you got to commit to them, right?
Right. It's like, you're setting up this delicious meal, all these tantalizing ingredients, and then you forget to actually cook it.
Exactly.
You're just left with all this unfulfilled potential. Like, what could this have been?
Totally. And it seems like that's the case with some of the other relationships in the film, too. Like, for instance, the feud between the twin brothers, Hal and Bill. It's mentioned a lot in the reviews, but a lot of critics found it to be kind of underdeveloped and reliant on cliches.
So it's like we have Bill as this, like, stereotypical, toxic, domineering twin, and then Hal as the more sensitive, introspective one.
Yeah.
Kind of a classic good versus evil dynamic, but maybe not explored in a way that feels like fresh or particularly insightful.
That seems to be the consensus, yeah. And this ties into another criticism that keeps popping up. The feeling that the film might be suffering from, like, trauma overload. It introduces some really intriguing themes: toxic masculinity, generational pain, the weight of the past. But it doesn't really give those themes space to breathe.
Yeah, I can see how that would be an issue. You've got this chaotic, violent monkey just wreaking havoc everywhere. And then on top of that, you're trying to weave in these complex themes about family dynamics and societal issues. Is it even possible to balance all that effectively?
It's a delicate balancing act, for sure. And some reviewers felt that the monkey, while ambitious in its scope, doesn't quite stick the landing. It's like the film is so focused on that central metaphor, the monkey as this embodiment of grief and chaos, that it kind of neglects to fully explore the human stories that surround it.
There's this one specific subplot that caught my eye, actually.
Oh, yeah?
A few reviews mention this link between the monkey and patriarchal violence, suggesting that this destructive behavior is, like, passed down from generation to generation. I don't know. What's your take on that?
I think it's a fascinating idea. It has the potential to be really powerful. But again, several critics have pointed out that it feels more like a missed opportunity than a fully realized exploration. Like it's hinted at but never fully developed, which leaves the audience with more questions than answers.
So while the monkey is undoubtedly a visual and visceral spectacle, it seems like it might have missed the mark when it comes to fully exploring the deeper themes it hints at. Almost like it's afraid to commit to its own potential for emotional depth.
That's a really insightful way to put it. And that leads us to another major point of discussion. The film's sometimes jarring tonal inconsistency.
Right. This is where we get those laugh out loud, 1 minute, deeply disturbed the next kind of reaction.
Exactly.
The blend of slapstick humor and sincere emotion, it doesn't always feel like it's working seamlessly. It's like the film is constantly shifting gears and you're never quite sure what to expect next.
Yeah, one review I read described it as a tonal roller coaster ride, which I think is pretty accurate. And while some viewers might enjoy that unpredictable, chaotic energy, others are going to find it exhausting or even frustrating.
I'm curious to hear more about these tonal shifts. Are there any specific examples that stood out in the reviews?
Well, several reviewers mentioned the opening scene, which features a death by harpoon, and it's described as being very Tarantino-esque in its over-the-top violence and dark humor. But then later scenes try to juggle that tone with serious family drama and emotional moments, and the blend doesn't always feel cohesive.
So you have these moments of pure, unadulterated absurdity, but then you're also trying to ground the story in genuine human emotion.
Exactly.
It just sounds like a tough balancing act.
It is, it is. And while the film's director, Osgood Perkins, he's clearly a master of horror, some critics felt that his grasp on comedy wasn't quite as strong, and as a result, some of the jokes come across as more snarky than sharp, undercutting the emotional weight of the film's more serious moments.
So even though The Monkey is generating a lot of buzz, it seems like it's a film that's really going to divide audiences. Some are going to love that chaotic energy, its willingness to push boundaries, while others will find it messy, underdeveloped, tonally inconsistent.
That's a great way to sum it up. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore those divisive elements even further, looking at the film's stylistic influences, its place within the horror comedy genre, and its potential legacy in the world of cinema.
We talked about the crazy plot of The Monkey, Theo James's performance, and how the film tries to, balance that shocking humor with these deeper, more serious themes. But one thing we haven't touched on much is the style of the film. Like, what are the visuals like?
Oh yeah, that's where things get really interesting visually. The Monkey is stunning to look at, but pulls inspiration from some pretty unexpected places. Some critics are even comparing it to those classic grindhouse films, while others are pointing to like a more art house aesthetic.
Oh, wow.
It's this bizarre collision of like highbrow and lowbrow influences.
Yeah, a few reviewers have mentioned like a Tarantino-esque feel, especially in that over-the-top opening scene with the harpoon. But is it just like a cheap imitation, or does it do something unique with that style?
It definitely plays with those Tarantino tropes like the style-like violence, the dark humor, the sudden bursts of shocking gore. But The Monkey uses all those elements to create something that's both familiar and totally unique.
Hmm.
It's like they took Tarantino's signature style and portrayed it through a funhouse mirror,
Okay.
twisting it into something unsettling but still darkly hilarious.
And we talked about that one shot of the blood-soaked monkey grinning in the shadows, which sounds both terrifying and kind of beautiful at the same time. It really sounds like the film is trying to be more than just a typical slasher flick.
Yeah, I mean, the cinematography is one of the things that people are praising universally. Nico Aguilar, the cinematographer, has created these really eerie, almost dreamlike visuals. It's not just about showing violence, it's about creating a mood, an atmosphere that really sticks with you long after the credits roll.
So where does The Monkey fit into the whole horror comedy genre? I mean, is it a straight-up spoof, a dark satire, something else entirely?
That's the thing, it defies categorization. It's clearly not a typical spoof or parody. There's this real sense of darkness and dread beneath the surface.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not afraid to be genuinely funny, often in ways that make you kind of question your own sense of humor.
So it's like walking a tightrope between these two genres, horror and comedy, and maybe even stumbling a few times along the way. Do you think that's ultimately a strength or a weakness of the film?
I think that's what makes The Monkey so fascinating. It's what makes it so polarizing, too. It's not a safe film. It's constantly challenging the audience, pushing boundaries, forcing you to, confront your own comfort zones.
Right.
And that kind of risk-taking is something that's pretty rare to see nowadays in film.
I can definitely see how this film would spark some interesting debates. I mean, some people are going to love that chaotic energy, that willingness to go to extremes, but others are going to be turned off by the uneven tone and the underdeveloped themes.
Absolutely. But I think that's ultimately a good thing. We need films that challenge us, that make us think and feel in ways we didn't expect. The Monkey may not be perfect, but it's definitely memorable. And it's going to stay with me for a while.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into The Monkey, what's the final takeaway for our listeners? Should they rush out to see it, avoid it at all costs?
If you're looking for a safe, predictable horror comedy, The Monkey is probably not for you. But if you're willing to take a risk, dive headfirst into a film that's both exhilarating and unsettling, then I highly recommend checking it out. Just be prepared for a wild, messy, and ultimately unforgettable ride.
Well said. And for those of you who do decide to brave the chaos of The Monkey, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Come back, share your reactions, your interpretations, your wildest theories. That's what the deep dive is all about, exploring the depths of cinema and engaging in thoughtful, insightful conversations with our fellow movie lovers. Until next time, happy viewing.